certainly it's good that somebody in Denmark claps their hands when the bureaucrat comes. Yes, I am a bureaucrat, and I like to think of myself rather as a civil servant. And I really cannot think of a better way to serve civil society than being here today. I was trying to think of a good way to say how happy I am to have the privilege of being here. And I found a very simple one. I am paid to have ideas about employment, about policies. And I may have had some interesting idea in the past, but what I am sure is I have never had an idea as simple, as brilliant, as successful, and as helpful in practice as what Kvinfo has done and what it's doing on mentoring. So I cannot just say thank you as I do in any other conference for a matter of courtesy, but also really I think it is a privilege to be here and say personally, but also from the point of view of the Commission, how we appreciate and how the work that Kvinfo does is really useful for society and for women. Now, I would like to say words about the European Union and its immigrants, then about the European Union and its women, and then about the European Union and its women immigrants, and say a few words about the future then, as a conclusion. What about the Union and its women? Well, first of all, let's say a few words about the condition of women. And the first thing to say is that in the world, and certainly in Europe, the condition of women has improved dramatically. And let me just give you a couple of figures. Women, of course, have a higher life expectancy than men. Now last year, Japan, for the first time ever, passed the threshold of 40,000 Japanese citizens of more than 100 years of age. Now, of those 40,000, 33,000 were women. So really, women are the future in many ways, certainly demographically. Women also have, there are more women than men in Europe with a higher education degree. This is also new. It wasn't the case 10 years ago. It is the case since 2007. And women, there are more women than men that have at least upper secondary education. And last but not least, there are far fewer women than men that are school dropouts, which means probably that women know more than men how important it is for anybody, but especially for a woman, to have a good education. Because indeed, if you look at one particular criterion that gives you a better chance to be in the labour market, whether you're a man or a woman, it's certainly to have a good education. Now, we are in the crisis, as I'm sure you've noticed, is a very strong crisis. We have 22.1 million unemployed in Europe. Women haven't done so badly so far, for a very simple reason, that most of the jobs that have been most affected by the crisis in terms of unemployment are jobs that are mainly related to construction and tourism in my country, Spain, automobile, or across Europe, so mostly mainly related sectors. So if you're a woman, you haven't done that badly statistically in the labour market, except if you are young, except if you're an immigrant, and except if you are a low-skilled woman, because then you suffer the problems that immigrants, young people, and low-skilled suffer across Europe. So one important point is that with this in mind, the progress that has been made, one thing we should add immediately is that the economic case for gender equality is also really, really very clear and strong. Gender equality is not for women, it's for society. And let me give you just one example. I know this is not the right place to remind you of something you know very well as the economic case for gender equality. Let me give you one example. There's a study from a professor from Sweden called Asa Strömström. Now, I am torturing her name. Löfström is probably something similar to what her name is pronounced. Well, this lady has studied what would be the impact on Europe's growth if women had the same employment rate than men and the same conditions in terms of hours worked and under occupation. But the result is a striking one. Depending on the situation in different member states, between 15% and 45% increase in GDP is what it would mean to have women in the same role as men in the labour market. Now that's really extraordinary, but the most extraordinary is not that, is that this is well known, it is a fact. Now if it's such a fact, if skills are so important for people's livelihood and people's success in the labour market, and if women are more skilled than men, and if the economic case for gender equality is so clear, there's one simple question that sort of crosses your mind: why isn't it happening? Why don't we have gender equality if the economic case for it is clear? Now, the answer to that is, of course, manifold, and I'll come to this at the end if I have a little minute. But certainly, the core answer, if one had to produce one single word why this is happening, it is the word care. women play a disproportionate role in the care of children and older people. And the state doesn't compensate for that. And the proof of that, very simply, is that if you look at the countries, for example, Denmark, where the situation of women is better, it can be directly linked to one very simple fact. When you have cheap, affordable, universal care for children and elderly, then you have more women that can afford to go to work, and more low-skilled women who can afford to have a job. So it's fairly straightforward. It's not happening. It's a matter of society's priorities. Now this brings me directly to my third point, which is women and Euro-based women immigrants, because of course, around the world of care is also the world of women immigrants. And let me say straight away, I'm sure in the debate we can perhaps come back to this, that one of the things that our society should perhaps not tolerate is that the emancipation of European women, which is of course a necessity, should be done on the backs of the lack of emancipation of non-European women in Europe. So what about women and its immigrants? Well, let me say, actually I can make this very, very short. All the elements of gender discrimination in Europe for European women are the same for non-European women, except stronger. Gender pay gap, employment rates, unemployment rates, and sector discrimination and segregation by occupational types. Now, what is then the risk for a woman? Well, the first risk for an immigrant woman is the fact that she's an immigrant. That is more important, according to our studies, is more important in terms of discrimination. It is worse to be an immigrant in a way than to be a woman. Because women are subject to the 3 Ds of the curse of immigrants in our labour markets, actually in all labour markets in developed economies, which is that they get the dangerous, the dull, and dirty jobs. This applies to men immigrant, it applies to women immigrant too. But then also there is a specific discrimination for women, and let me just take a quick look at what are the main determinants of the employment rate and labour participation for immigrant women. It's the age of the youngest child, and it is the time of arrival. And both things give an indication of the fact that the type of discrimination that women immigrants have in Europe is not so different from the discrimination that other women suffer. For example, the impact of childbearing onto their chances in the economy, but also of something that is specific for immigrant women, which is the fact that it takes a long time for women who come from abroad to integrate themselves in our labour market. And this is why something like Kvinfo and its initiative mentoring is so extraordinarily important, because if you can do something to ease the transition of an immigrant woman towards European labour markets, then you're doing a lot for her overall integration in society. Interestingly, to reinforce this, I think in line with what Kvinfo is doing, because if I understand correctly, about 40% of women that are beneficiaries of Kvinfo mentoring are higher educated. It's interesting that the employment participation of women immigrants is lower with respect to European immigrants, European women, when they are high skilled. And what does it mean? It's very simple. That there is more immigrant women in Europe from non-European countries that are high skilled and are obliged to take a low skilled job because they are immigrant and they don't find a job according to their capacities. Well, let me now come to the good news, because if you look at with a minimum of hope into Europe's future, well, if you look beyond the crisis, if you look at the consequences of our aging societies, the consequences of globalization and technological change, well, then you see that what Europe has to do is what? Well, very simply, to do the kind of things that give more opportunities to women. We will have to increase the skills of our labour force, and there women are already in an advantaged position vis-à-vis men. We will have to increase the number of women and migrants in general in the labour market. We have to increase and improve family policies and reconciliation. And we have to increase, of course, also retirement age, because otherwise our livelihoods will not be, and our social protection systems will not be sustainable. So, as I said, certainly in the future, looking at EU 2020, and the European Commission will present Tuesday next week a number of initial ideas about EU 2020, well then, if we're going to look at our future, certainly we have to look at policies that take into account that we're growing older, that we are populations that need to improve our skills, and above all, that we need to use better the human capital in our societies. And the biggest reservoir of human capital in our societies is our society's women.
And the most unexploited human capital among the women of our societies are the unsung heroes that are immigrant women. And one important lesson that I would like to leave with you is that a discrimination, an injustice, a scandal will not exist in society until it is recognized by society. And this is the extraordinary importance of Kvinfo and its initiative. Because what you are trying to do, what you are doing successfully, is to show to society what the condition of women and women immigrants is, the contribution they can bring to society, and it is when society will realize that this simple fact that things will have to change, and things will change. So this is why I was so happy to come with you, and I'm so grateful you had the patience of listening to me for 20 minutes. Thank you very much.